G'day, welcome to Horsepower, and today we're here at the Cust rally sprint organised by the Autosport Club. So today is a bit of a special day. I have my Celica out here and the 86. I'm not driving both. We have old Scott here who's going to take the wheel of the 86. So yeah, big fun agile day out here today. There's a full entry here. It's bloody freezing, but it should be a good day. Let's get into it. Here in my 86, but I'm in the wrong seat. Mr. Scott is driving this one. How'd you find it? Good. I started in third. I tried to launch it in third, it didn't quite clearly like that. And then it was just a mess trying to get around the gears. And then I was just being rather ginger on it because it felt quite loose in the morning, but it's definitely a bit better now, so be able to push it a bit harder throughout the day. Yeah, she's definitely a slippery track, but it has gotten better since cars have gone past it. So we've just done the first run, and I'm glad he hasn't crashed it. That is that is on my mind as well. It's your new choice. But don't be a bitch as well. Yeah. Feel free to keep those go-go's, those slow hands going, eh? Yeah.
that's the first run done in the Celica. No real dramas. My bonnet might have almost caught on fire. You could say maybe that's a drama. Just like they did in the last event, it spilled a lot of oil out of the catch can, and I don't know why. So it did that on the reconnaissance run, but then it wasn't so bad on the actual first run, so I'm not too sure what's going on there. I've just wiped everything down and put some reflective tape on the inside of the bonnet to hopefully stop it from catching alight. Another problem I've found, so there's a few longer straights in this run and my gearing is way too short, so I'm hitting a rev limiter in 5th gear really quick. So I'm going to have to sort that out at some point. Perfect for tight twisty stuff, not so much for the long straights. So that brings the Cust sprint to an end. I'm back here at home after the event. That last run, unfortunately, it is now becoming a theme on this channel. I've blown up another motor, so it's very disheartening. It was a good run, and the very last corner, the motor just lost all power. It's got an extremely bad vibration, and it's not got compression on 4 cylinders, maybe not even 3. So I've done something fairly catastrophic to the motor. What that is yet, I don't know. It could have been some numerous things. Obviously I had that problem with the gear ratios being wrong. I need to double check they actually sent me the right ratio, because I did some calculations and it doesn't really line up. Basically we had a max speed of 176 k's, and on that long straight I spent a lot of time on the rev limiter high up in the RPM, which is really not very good for it. I wouldn't have thought that it would cause serious damage, but maybe it has. So possibly an over rev thing, well, not over rev, but maybe too much time at high RPM with not much load on it. Possibly there was an error in me putting it together. Possibly there's a component failure, maybe just pushing too much power, too much torque, and overstressing maybe the rods or the pistons, Chinese rods. Anyway, it's all just guesswork at the moment, so I've got to pull that apart, see what happens. In terms of the event, it was actually going not too bad for me. I was coming 5th up until my little incident. Cool piece of road. Big thanks to all the organisers and volunteers to make that happen. I think I ended up finishing 6th. I'll have to double check that, but yeah, anyway, so back to the drawing board. Unfortunately, when you play around with experimental engines like this, this can happen. It's all part of the learning process. I pulled the sump off the motor, and I have found a friend called Rodney. So this has broken its rod bolts. These are supposed to be ARP rod bolts in here, and possibly they are genuine, possibly they're not. So this is not a horsepower issue. This is purely due to an over rev. So usually when rod bolts fail, it's due to the forces pulling these apart, which only happens like on an over rev. So when I was sitting at limiter with anti-lag, there's no load on the rods and they're just spinning. So yeah, it's quite clear what's happened here. Unfortunately, it's also ruined the block. It's ruined one piston, and that piston's gone up into the head. I haven't got the head off yet, but it's likely ruined that head, at least the valves in that. It's quite annoying because that's a fully prepped block and a ported and polished and prepped head as well. So the damage is fairly collateral. Such is life. So what I'm going to do, well, these haven't failed due to horsepower. I am going to upgrade them anyway to a set of powder rods. These are significantly more expensive. Here's the damage here. You can see up there that it's ruined the block. Sorry, it's kind of hard to see with this lighting. Fortunately, the sump's intact. Don't want this to happen again. It's interesting. I've done a bit of searching around and I've never seen a set of these fail. I'm sure they have, but I couldn't find any on the internet. So we'll carry on pulling the motor out, strip it down, and then order some more parts. Now I've got the head off, you can inspect the damage. You can see that piston looks like it's got a bit of damage, a lot more on the bottom of the piston too, obviously. The bore actually looks not too bad. I already know this block is toast, so it doesn't really matter. Fortunately, it's not all bad. It looks like the head has survived. We can see it's got a couple of wee nicks there, but those aren't an issue at all. The only issue is that it's bent the valves, so I can swap those out. It may need to get the valve seat tidied up, but that's a big win because this head is ported and polished, as well as being prepped and surface and everything else, so that saved me a lot of money having this head survive. Now that I've got everything apart, we can see the damage close up. Number 2 journal here is obviously pretty toast. The crank otherwise all looks in perfect condition. But yeah, so that's only destined for the scrap, unfortunately. Come across to the block, and when it's thrown a leg out of bed, it's usually pretty common to put a hole in the side of the block. It actually hasn't in this case, and just put a hole into the oil gallery. So this block is also toast. Maybe you could be real keen and weld that up, but considering these blocks are worth about $100, it's really not worth it. And then coming across to the pistons and rods, so these are the 3 that survived, and there's one here which had a little nick from some debris, and actually looks kind of bent as we sort of sight down it. I presume it's bent from that debris rather than bent from horsepower. So yeah, need to make a trip to the scrap man, and I have just purchased from the local wrecking yard a
brand new second-hand 5S FE block. Again, this is a square block, which indicates that it's the revised 98 model block. I've actually heard, after talking to some people lately, there's actually a variation in the post 98 5S blocks depending on the market. So the US has a different spec. The Australian ones, they actually made them in Australia, and apparently they're a really weak spec. And they also made them in Japan, and we're in New Zealand, and we basically are Japan's scrapyard. So I presume this one came from Japan, but it could be from an Aussie one. I don't know. Anyway, it's what I've got, so we'll use it and hopefully it works. Now I need to fix one of the instigators of this problem to start with, and that is the gear ratio. So I maxed out about 176 k's, and that's not fast enough. Mostly due to me ordering the wrong final drive ratio when I ordered this gear kit. Obviously I've now got it apart and we need to change the final drive. And with the Celica, the final drive is set from the ratio of the input shaft, which is in there, and the crown wheel. And so what you need to do to change that is to take this gear set out, strip it and replace it with another shaft. The gear is ground onto the shaft, so there's no way of removing it. And then we need to replace the crown wheel. So the output shaft and the crown wheel are matched pairs, so you can't just go change just the crown wheel or just the input shaft, you need to change both. Not only that, the oil pump drive is also dictated on the gear ratio due to the size of the teeth, etc. So we need to swap that out as well. Fortunately, SQS do a range of ratios, so you can just go into the website, see which ratio you want and order another one. So over here, this is what arrived. New crown wheel, new oil pump gear. And a nice new output shaft. As well as that, I bought some new bearings. I just don't think that I'll be able to get those old ones off the shaft without destroying them. The output shaft is now swapped over, crown wheel swapped over, and also the oil pump gear. It's all fairly straightforward. I've got another video in which I go into a lot more detail about how to assemble these gearboxes, so I suggest you go and watch that if you're interested. All I'm doing now is gonna assemble all the rest of it back together. Another important step which I didn't film was checking the preload on these tapered bearings. So I did that earlier and it's fine, so I'm ready to put it back together, make sure all these surfaces here are all clean, make sure all the components going back in are all nice and clean, and bolt it all together. 5S GDE block, take 2. So this is a freshly machined block, again another late model 5S. And I'm changing a few things. Firstly, I've put a little oil restrictor in there. So if you've watched my previous videos, you know that I had a lot of blow-by come out of the engine, and I suspect it's due to too much oil in the head. So I'm fixing this with two different means. One, a restrictor in the block, so less oil will get into the head, and an additional drain from the back of the head, which will sit about here and then come around to this block, come around to this hole in the block, sorry. So the usual machining process was done to this block, all the line home was checked, bored out to suit 87.5mm pistons, same as the last engine. What we are changing is connector rods. These are some pouters from the US of A, and they're a very interesting design. They're what they call a X-beam, and to be honest, I'm not really sold on the engineering principles of them, but they are well proven and they should be better than the old max speedings. And as well as that, I have upgraded to an ARP 625 rod bolt to do everything we can to stop that from happening again. We have old mate Mr. Adam here. There you go. He's measuring the stretch here on these bolts. So you were saying they're all worked out as expected?
Yep, powder supplied the spec sheet there, and 65 foot-pounds between 6 thou and 6.5 thou of stretch, and it's pretty much exactly what we're getting.
Sweet.
That's exactly 6.5. And we're about to check the bearing clearance as well.
So I'm not going to do an in-depth build. I've already done a bunch of engine build videos, so feel free to go back and watch those if you're interested. The motor's back in, the car's back together, it's up and running, everything seems sweet. I've taken it for a run-in, taken it around the hills nice and slowly, load up the motor, everything seems spot on. So all in all, a successful rebuild. Just some final thoughts about what happened and what I did to fix it. So obviously the rod broke on the max speeding rod, and they are apparently genuine ARPs. They came out of China, so you never know for sure. Had a chat to a few people that build these motors and or build engines, and they say they've never seen a failure with these max speeding rods, and they are pretty confident that they are genuine ARP bolts. And saying that, people say they've also had failures with genuine ARP bolts. So where does this leave us? Are they worth using? So my conclusion is I think the rods themselves are good. They handle plenty of power. When they came out of the motor, the one that wasn't damaged, well, the one that was damaged was obviously quite bad, but all the rest of them looked perfect. There was no bending, so they handle the power okay, no problem at all. Obviously the problem when you break rod bolts is RPM, and I think spending a lot of time on the limiter was very much a contributing factor to that. What I did, obviously, I probably went overkill in rebuilding it with the powder rods and the ARP 625s, but what it costs you to build a motor, it's really a what do you value? And I don't want to rebuild motors. I like them to be reliable. So if you were going to build the same motor, what would I recommend? I think the max speeding rods are actually a good rod. I would, however, make sure they are genuine ARP bolts, and if you're going to be really rough on it, up them to 625s. The powder's a good rod. They're very well proven. I'm going to go find out. As I said before, I'm not a huge fan of the engineering behind them, and the reason I think they're so strong is purely just due to putting a massive amount of material in it, so they are very heavy. And then they also didn't measure up properly, so I had to get them remachined for the perfect spec, whereas the max speeding rods were spot on out of the box. So now the car's back together for Ashley Forest Rally Sprint, which is the next event coming up, and that was always my goal when rebuilding this motor, was to get the car ready for that. It's going to be a big event, it's going to be a lot of fun, so stay tuned for that. Thanks very much for watching, everyone, and see you in the next one.